Welcome to the Breakout Room. Today we have David Peckinpaugh, President of Maritz Travel, as well as Isaac Collazo, who is Vice President of Performance Planning and Strategy with us. We are talking industry trends beyond just technology. Thank you for joining us. One of the great things about today is that, and actually all of our sessions now, whether you're watching live or the recorded sessions, we've worked with the CIC so that you can get CMP credits towards your certification. So please visit thebreakoutroom.yourmeeting.com to learn more about how you qualify for CMP credits. In the Breakout Room, we focus on bringing you takeaways and usable information that you can apply in your job, more than just template meeting planning, if you will. I know we have a variety of people attending today, and a thank you for those who have sent in your live questions as well as your call-in questions. We're going to get to those in a minute. There's a Northeast retailer called Sims that has a great commercial, and their tagline is that an educated consumer is the best customer. That's what this is about. Our job is to help all of you become better consumers with better information. And we're going to give you some different perspectives today with our guests as they have tremendous experience. This is a forum that is for you. You need to be the one asking the questions. You drive the content. Right above me is a live chat tool where you'll be able to click on and be able to type in your questions as you go. And as you know, most of you called in and brought questions before. Now we're going to take a moment and watch a Canadian experience, and then we'll be back to explore some more.
Isn't it time you got all that top 40 out of your system? Newfoundland and Labrador.
Wow, what more can I say? That is one tremendous destination. If any of you get a chance to visit St. John's, Newfoundland, or Labrador, you will be wowed, not just by the people, the mysterious accents, the characters, if you will, that you probably just saw in that video, but you really would love the compulsion for dance, beverages, adult beverages at times, and certainly the song and dance. And one of my favorite bands, Great Big Sea, is actually from that region as well. So please, as you consider destinations for your meetings, contact the CTC, the Canadian Tourism Commission, and they can give you more information on the destination and other fantastic places throughout Canada. Behind me, we are actually sitting in Trinity Beach, which is out in Newfoundland, one of the spectacular areas within that country. And as you can see, just incredible, incredible water views. St. John's is the capital of Newfoundland, and it's the oldest city in North America and has the eastmost point of North America as well there. One of the things that I love about the destination is how they love to have fun. And their tagline is, "You never have to catch up when you're always ahead." And that's very appropriate when you consider that they're an hour and a half ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So please get a chance to get up there and visit it. One of the great things also for you meeting planners out there is that their convention center just announced a major expansion in the upcoming years. So even offering you further opportunities to consider the destination. Now, I'm Pete Hanley. I am President and COO of PlanNet, yourmeeting.com. I am your host for today, and as I told you, we have some great guests. This is not about me, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. You can visit me on LinkedIn or on yourmeeting.com to learn more. But again, thank you for those who have already typed in their questions and called in with your questions, because we're going to get started. David Peckinpaugh, my first guest, as I said, is President of Maritz Travel. He's actually just recently joined them after a couple jaunts across the country and just recently moving in from San Diego. So we really welcome you. He's had tremendous experience in the industry, working on the meeting planning side for Confron and then Experiant, but also heading up the San Diego Convention and Visitors Bureau, and brings a wealth of knowledge to not just the past and how it applies to what we do every day, but also certainly the trends that are coming forward. My other guest is Isaac Collazo. Isaac is Vice President of Performance Planning and Strategy for IHG, InterContinental Hotels Group. And I'll tell you what, if numbers have ever bored you, this is not what's going to happen with Isaac. Isaac has a real bent for taking numbers and making it fun, but also teaching us how to really apply that information. So both of you, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
One of the things that I want to point out as we get started again is we have a little tool right up here. Please click on it to ask questions, audience. And that's also a great place to just say ooh and ah when we're saying some fantastic and wow stuff as we go through this. So we can interact a little bit as we go through the session. But we've got some great slides actually today as well that we're going to go through. Because it's data, we wanted to be able to integrate this. Off to my left and your right, you will actually see some great slides as we go through. And the first one here, and I'm going to actually talk to David a little bit directly, is we've seen a major shift in marketplace in the last couple of years. And certainly spend is on the rebound. We've seen some focus on risk management and the need for it with the dramatic things that have gone on in recent months especially. And in light of celebrating yesterday and 9/11 in 10 years, I think it's a very apropos discussion to revisit it. And I'd also like to kind of talk through some fundamental demand shifts. So David, again, thanks for coming. Maybe you can give the audience and me a little bit of insight on what you're seeing, both in your new position but also from where you're coming from, so that we can learn how to apply it and talk a little.
I appreciate it, and thanks for the invitation, Isaac. Great to be here with you. And we'll try to make this as lively and interactive as possible. Wish we were sitting on a beach in Newfoundland.
Exactly. Yeah.
But just to be clear, we're in a studio in Washington, D.C., so, but it's beautiful here as well. I wanted to start with some pretty high-level trends and some comments, knowing that we'll probably drive into some more specific questions as we get into the discussion here, and try to make this lively. Spend is definitely on the rebound. I think from a Maritz Travel perspective, we are probably in the 85 to 90% recovery phase of where we were pre-2008. So everything we have to talk about, we talked about earlier about year-over-year numbers are always dangerous because of how difficult 2008 and 2009 were. And obviously 2010 is a recovery year. But now in 2011 calendar year, it's our fiscal 2012 to confuse things even more. But we really see that we're 85, 90% back. And as we will discuss a little further, that it's a mixed bag. And I always equate this industry to a roller coaster ride, and as do a lot of folks. And we're kind of on the tick, 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 going up the big ramp. We don't know when the next big drop is.
I'm glad you referred to it as a roller coaster because it is interesting. I think everybody thinks of it as a negative necessarily when you're going down the hill or maybe up the hill, right? But there are pros to both sides and cons to both sides.
Oh, yeah. It's whether you're a seller or a buyer. These cycles, and they're always cycles, really do play in and make a big impact. So we definitely see spend rebounding. We definitely see, I think, an environment of risk management becoming much more to the forefront. And we'll talk about more details on that, but everything from PCI compliance and personal data integrity to contract language to emergency preparedness. So that, if you look at what's happened just this last, month with earthquakes and hurricanes and everything else that's been going on for the last several years, it's a big issue and one we need to dig into, I think, a little bit further. The other thing I wanted to talk about also is the measuring of our business events. I think there's been a lot of talk about ROI, ROM, ROO, all the R's.
Exactly.
But what does that mean? And I think we're seeing not only an increased awareness and focus on that, but also I think taking it to the next level, which is how do we measure the impact of events on the individual attendee? At Maritz, we call that meetings effectiveness, where we are analyzing and doing research on attendee behavior, attitudes, and performance pre- and post-events. And I think if you really look at the intent of business events, which are to drive strategy for the sponsoring organizations, you really need to get into that measuring. And I think that's one of the big trends that we see as well.
Well, and speaking of measuring attitudes, from a data standpoint, are you seeing similar type things? What are you
Very much so, Peter. I think what we're seeing right now is really the return of demand. And I think one of the things, as you see in the chart in front of us or next to us in the photograph, you'll see that demand actually is at all-time highs. Even back in, or as late as August now, the August data that we're looking at is also the best August this industry's ever had, even though we've seen the stock market drop between 10 and 20%, depending on what day you're looking at the stock market. So you are seeing fundamentally a lot of demand, and most of it is coming from groups and meetings as well as transient. And just to give you an idea on this graph, what you're seeing here is the 7-month supply or the 7-month demand figures ending July. And you can see that back in 2008, before the recession, we had sold as an industry just under 600 million rooms. At the end of 2011, or at the end of July of 2011, we've sold 623 million rooms. So again, fundamentally, lots and lots of demand, and you know what that means. When demand comes back,
Absolutely.
what happens?
Well, it's interesting you bring it up because I know most of us don't necessarily feel that, right? We're watching the news or watching and hearing what's going on in the stock market, and that's not how I feel. So how do I communicate? What information here can I be communicating to my boards, my boss, my other stakeholders that can help me do my job better?
I think it's important to really understand the city that you're going to, the market, because not every market is seeing this type of demand that we're seeing, you know, across the whole of the industry. So it's really important to do your homework. Look at the market. Smith Travel Research provides all this data for cost, obviously, but they do provide the data on a market level basis where you can truly understand and research the market. If you want to go to New York in December, you're going to pay a lot. But if you want to go to Phoenix in the summer, you're going to pay less. Right. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's the dynamics of the marketplace. So my advice is do your homework. And a lot of this, you know, you can read not only trade publications, but also on Hotel News Now. A lot of this data is available there, so you can really look at, just by registering, you can get some of the data we're showing you today, or you can get more deeper analysis from Smith Travel, or people like yourself.
Also, it's not only doing your homework, but I think it's taking what you learn and how do you apply that to your organization? How do you, if you're an association, how do you take that to your board? How do you take it to executive leadership if you're a meeting planner? On the corporate side, how do you take it up through the ladder? Because I think there's a sense that things are the way they were a year ago.
Right.
So people are expecting the same kind of negotiation success, the same kind of contractual terms, and that's just simply not the case. It has made a dramatic shift from a buyer's market to a seller's market.
That's an interesting perspective.
And it had a lot of impact on availability, rates, obviously, and also lead times of meetings. If you are expecting there to be availability in 3 months for a meeting that's just popped up, or 6 months, you're in for a big shock.
And we have a question actually from the audience now.
Already.
Do you want to ask?
The question is, are there any U.S. markets that are specifically making a comeback versus ones that are still in a bust? Is it?
I don't think any market's in a bust per se at this point. I think what you're seeing is all the major markets, the top 25 markets as a whole, have seen the greatest growth. So they're the big markets as you would expect: New York, San Francisco, L.A., Atlanta. So I think there are a few markets that are not seeing the same type of growth, but they're not likely to be the markets that you're going to be planning a meeting in, right? So the thing is, I mean, the major markets continue to be the ones that drive our industry.
How about Las Vegas?
Las Vegas is a hard one.
You got to ask about the big beast.
Las Vegas is difficult only because Smith Travel doesn't have the best data for that market itself. From what we understand, Vegas is doing much better than it did a year ago, and it's coming back. How well it's coming back, I really don't have a perspective on.
From our perspective, it's back and back big as far as volume. Rates are still, I think, slow in recovery, and I think if you talk to the casinos and hotels there, that's what they're going to tell you is things are looking much better, particularly year over year, but rates not recovering as quickly as they thought it would.
And we're seeing a varying impact also on the AIG effect, right? We don't talk about it anymore as the AIG effect, but I think perception has not really been as big an impact. And are you experiencing the same thing?
Yes, and you'll see later on in some of the slides we have, we'll show you how the luxury segment's doing. It tends to be the smallest segment, or it is, doesn't tend. It is the smallest segment of the industry. It only represents about 2% of all rooms. And because of that, it's just come back strongly. And you'll see that the data occupancy in the luxury segment as of July of 2011 was about 71%. So nationwide, so very high occupancy.
And if I could add to that, too, I think what we've seen really reflects what Isaac was saying is a willingness to go back to those luxury properties with resort and spa in the name. You know, that sensitivity was so big, a year, 18 months ago. And I think the optics have really improved for the. I don't think we should assume they've gone away, because as soon as you think that, then some politician is going to jump into the fray again.
Well, first we start talking about cities. How about in particular market segments? Speaking pharma, speaking right. Where are you seeing that market going?
I can talk from our customer base, and I'll talk about a few. I think if you look at automotive, we see the big three coming back. I don't think we feel like that spend will ever recover 100%, but it's back. What we're also seeing is a reticence to commit long term. They're executing their events in the next 6, 12, 18 months, but long-term commitments, I think there's still a little hesitancy to make that leap. I think in the automotive, in the Asia market, particularly Japanese, obviously they had a huge issue. I think the anniversary is today, 6 months ago, with the tsunami, and that affected productivity and production schedules. And we do a lot of work in that space in the incentive market, and a lot of those meetings have been moved back 6 to 12 months. So we're seeing a big shift there. Insurance financial markets, kind of a mixed bag. The spending is down. It's down considerably, and we're questioning whether it'll ever really come back to pre-2008 levels, but I think it'll be healthy. Pharma, I think one of the key issues there are all the regulations that have been put on that, and particularly physician attendee events are really way down.
We have an audience question, actually.
Are there specific countries that are seeing strength as far as conventions happening in them, or is it, once again, kind of across the board?
You want me to take a first stab?
Sure.
I would say for us, domestic U.S. and North America is very strong. We saw a big pullback of international destinations, but I think that's recovering as well. And we're seeing what you would typically see as the standard markets, European Union countries, but some emerging. I think Brazil is one that we're seeing a lot of activity on. And so I think it is on recovery, but for us it's still somewhat of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually, even with the news this morning, with some more Greece issues, obviously, pending, and major banks in France who have obviously huge investments in the Greek market impacting it. Are you seeing that effect?
Again, what's interesting is we continue to see demand up all over the world. So it's not only a U.S. phenomenon. I was looking at the U.K. just last week. U.K. has sold more rooms than it ever has before. So, I mean, this goes on and on. You can see this in market after market after market. So this is a global demand phenomenon, and it really is about transient. And also, you'll see, I think it has a lot to do with income levels. So, yes, we know that there is high unemployment in the U.S. and around the world, but those that tend to travel are college educated. And college-educated individuals in the U.S. are the least impacted by unemployment. Unemployment among college-educated individuals 25 plus is about 4.3%.
I love this information. There's a slide actually
Don't you think
right
they
now.
see that as a right now?
Yeah, I think so.
That really travel and
It's
vacations are a right versus a luxury item. And I
Most
think that's a
definitely.
big mind shift.
And most definitely. I mean, among my peer set and my friends and colleagues, they're taking 3 vacations a year, essentially. Your spring break with your kids, your summer break, and then a Christmas break.
Yeah, the European mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally hitting us,
Yeah.
right?
We wish.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think there's still
Exactly.
I don't get vacations.
Exactly.
And so, but I think you're seeing a lot of that. And so as you've seen this chart, you really have to, again, peel back the onion. You can't just take the government statistics as they are and say the economy truly is in the tank. Is it hurting? Of course it is. Is it below potential? Of course it is. But at the same time, it is growing, and it is growing with unemployment at 9.3%. So you have a good number of individuals out of work, but our economy is growing.
Well, and I think that you hit it on. This slide is perfect for an understanding, too, because I think especially those who are attracting associations, for instance, who are attracting their attendees, I think one of the key factors here is that most of your attendees are probably not out of a job, and they're probably in companies that are seeing great cash influx right now and are doing fairly well, actually, relative to, or unfortunate, relative to the stock market, right?
I mean, there's some worry, of course. I mean, right now, with falling consumer confidence and falling business confidence, there's always a chance that we'll see retrenchment from consumers. If consumers retrench, i.e. stop spending, then business profits would fall. If business profits fall, then, you just fall that trail down, and it's not a good sight or not a good path. But right now, at this point, we continue to see very robust demand, especially in lodging. And again, if you consider that beginning of this month or beginning of August, we saw the stock market really fall, right? So that's when we lost 10 to 20% over the beginning of that month. Yet August was one of the best, or at this point we believe it was the best August on record for the industry in terms of demand.
Which is shocking, right?
Yeah.
And actually, David, I have a question for you. From the standpoint of where we've seen occupancy increasing, and obviously that's been a consistent basis for the last couple of years, and naturally next with that comes rate. How are you seeing that impacting your bookings, and even beyond that, the industry, and how it's impacting that?
Well, I think Isaac has some data that'll show that very clearly about the increase in rates. I think, but again, we have to keep in perspective. We tend to get into that year-over-year issue, and I think we really would be healthier to look at 2011 versus 2007 and say how are things behaving. I would say we see a dramatic increase in rates, but we're still considerably farther back than where we were in 2007. So there's again that roller coaster, if you will, that's occurring. And the other thing we're seeing in the marketplace is looking ahead next year. I think because of everything going on in the world and the economy, there is some reticence right now. I don't think they're not wholesaling, stopping programs or canceling, but I think they are holding back to see what happens maybe over the next 30, 60, 90 days, and then launching into it. So we're watching our 2013, for most people, the calendar year 2012, very closely, and to see what the actual ramifications are going to be.
Well, if they're watching closely and they're holding back a little, but occupancy is going up and rates going up, what's happening with the delinquencies and the issues of ownership in a lot of these hotels these days?
I mean, I think there's still a lot of hotels that are in the middle of refinancing. There are hotels changing hands. Again, most of it does not impact the consumer or the end user. So again, most of it impacts the ownership, the actual entity or individual. And so it tends to be a non-event for most of your clients and most everyone in the audience. But yes, you're seeing a lot of hands still change because, again, this was it was the worst recession. It was the Great Recession, right? So you expect a lot of these projects were built prior to the recession at very high interest rates, at very high cost. Now the values have come down. The rates haven't come up to match what was the pro forma for that property. So again, people are having some debt issues or meeting their debt obligations. So because of that, you'll continue to see a lot of changeover, but in most cases, it should be a non-event. Again, you'll hear about it, but it's a non-event.
Just as a word of caution, though, make sure your contracts
exactly.
address that issue clearly. I know
exactly
you.
Right.
IHG is a great partner, but you have to make sure you're protected as well.
That's a great point.
The other thing I would like to ask Isaac is the mix of business. Is a lot of this recovery being driven by transient group? What's the dynamic there?
Well, we saw initially in 2010 was the return of groups and meetings. So something as we forecast for our company, and that's something we didn't see very well. We didn't see very early on that group would come back like that. So early in 2010, you saw group just skyrocket. Now it tends to be more of transient demand. You're starting to see the transient piece come back, and actually not come back, very steady. So just steady growth, month after month after month, with lesser growth in group. It's still growing, but just lesser growth.
I'm sorry. I can interrupt because this topic is really important, I think, to meeting planners, because we're looking at, when we're doing our sourcing and our buying, is what impact is that transient demand having on our availability of group rooms?
Absolutely.
So we're seeing an impact of that.
Right.
So
and it's
group
impacting on the front end,
availability.
negotiating. But how about the OTAs? I mean, the online travel agencies and the Hotels.com and other tools that are out there. How is that going to impact us after we're arriving, right? And the giant sucking sound from the headquarter hotel. What's happening?
Well, before we go into the OTAs, because I think it all fits in, what you're seeing in front of you or to the side of you is occupancies across the country. What's amazing about this slide is this is a year-to-date slide, and you see the first three segments, luxury, upper upscale, and upscale, all at above 70%. That tells you, again, that's the demand piece, really, really strong demand. When you talk about OTAs, what's OTAs doing to the business? It's another vehicle to encourage people to travel. If you really think about it, with all the advertising, they are encouraging people to travel. So for you planning a meeting, yes, you are competing against the leisure side that are coming into the market, as well as then, just the actual increase in demand that's coming from transient and group. So again, it's adding at least, I think Smith Travel's thinking it's adding maybe 1% more to the demand side. So again, some interesting dynamics at work.
But any idea how it's impacting the rate? Most likely downward?
It most likely is, but again, most hotel companies have their guarantees in place, so you're not going to find a cheaper rate on the OTA. You're going to find the same cheaper rate available on the brand website. So in most cases, if it's a cheap rate, it's because there was availability at that case. We're not going to take away from from our rate, from
But
that
as we
piece.
climb that hill and the
Yeah,
market's
exactly.
going up, right? We're going to see it.
Here we go.
Exactly.
Deal with those hotel
Exactly.
contracts again, right? I
Yep.
mean, make sure that you're covering yourself because literally, I mean, you've been negotiating great hotel rates, but those OTAs are going to be very different as we go up and down this roller coaster.
Exactly.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of contracts, too, I think the other issue we're seeing is the impact of resort fees in contracts. And, I mean, there is a big battle going on right now between the buyer community and the hotel community when it comes to resort fees. And I don't have a solution. If I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today.
Exactly.
Other than to make sure you're aware of it, that if it's an issue that you're working with your hotel, hopefully in a partnership model, to see really how you can work through that. But we're getting a lot of pushback from clients, particularly on the resort side, with those resort fees, just actually changing destinations, changing property decisions because of the impact of resort fees.
And I think just what Dave said is important. It's a partnership. It's working with the hotels, working with your contacts at the hotels. I think that's very important. It is about relationships. And so
And talking doesn't take away from strategy or ability
Right.
to get the best
Right.
rate. You really do need to communicate
Right.
and ask better questions of each other. I think that's, if anything, that we're
Exactly
getting
right.
out of this, is if you read any one of these pieces of data, you're going to go down the wrong path. You
Yep.
need to be kind of looking at all sides of that hill.
Exactly right. Do your homework, essentially.
Absolutely. How about from a build standpoint? How is inventory impacting where we are?
Well, that's also interesting, is that supply is actually falling, right? New supply is not coming on the marketplace. Again, it's very hard to finance big hotel projects at this point. And because of that, you're seeing very little new supply come in, and you probably will see very little new supply come in for the next 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
And so as demand increases and supply growth slows, again, that means occupancies are going to continue to trend upward. They're not going to trend downward, they're going to trend upward. And so you're going to have less new big hotels to negotiate with.
I mean, just think about what big projects are out there. You've got the Omni in Dallas. You've got the new, I think it's a JW in D.C.
Did you mention the hotel?
I mean, there's
Not much
probably
You can count them
less
on your-
than
yeah.
less than two hands of any
Right.
kind of significant projects going on.
And very few are breaking ground at this point in terms of large projects because, again, financing is still very difficult. So it's going to take some time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is a fascinating side to look at as you look at negotiating and how do you approach your meeting and creating value. Are you guys experiencing anything different in how hotels are evaluating my meeting? When I send you my lead, or Dave, when you're sending out your clients' meetings to get hotels to bid on it, how are we seeing a different focus on evaluating meetings? And is my meeting still an ugly baby, or is it now just a really pretty one?
Do you want to?
That sounds like a Maritz Travel question.
I would say I think we see a significant increase in the sophistication of the meeting planner and the buyer. I think, probably the last decade there's been a lot of education on revenue management, yield management, the impact that has on negotiations. And so I think planners overall are better prepared when they're going into those discussions. If not, go to PCMA, go to MPI, go to ASAE. They all have great resources on really understanding that, and there's a lot of education out in the marketplace. Our hotel partners are great at working with us and providing that education because I think you need to know what's going on behind the curtain. With the guy in the glass booth at the used car dealer, same thing's going on at a hotel. There's a lot of decisions and things being looked at when your business is being analyzed. So I think planners are better prepared. I think the hotels are being more transparent in those discussions. But where we were here, we're probably still here. I mean, there's still a ways to go.
Bring that up because, go ahead.
Well, I just say, again, it goes back to a relationship. You've got to have the relationship with the hotel and discuss it. I mean, it may mean moving your meeting from a Tuesday start to a Wednesday start or to a Sunday start, whatever, but it could be a win-win for both you and the hotel. It doesn't have to be a one-sided win. It could be a win-win.
Well, I think it's interesting because we often talk about either the supplier side or the demand side and what's going on there, and I think we sometimes forget to utilize that resource of what room sets might have been working better for, or creative room sets. And I know we've talked about the attendee experience, and what are you guys doing different with the attendee experience? How is that impacting? It's one thing to negotiate great rates and focus on the bottom line of the cost side of the meeting, but how can we increase the revenue side or increase the return on this meeting, right?
Well, and I think that's it. I mean, you can focus a lot on the process, but at the end of the day, these events are strategic events. They're there to drive specific behavior and with business results in mind, if the organization is doing it right. And so the experience, particularly in the incentive space, which we're obviously highly deployed against, that experience is really critical. I mean, it is what we're delivering, and it's why I just wrote an email this morning about the importance of people. We get so, and that's why I love that we weren't really talking technology today,
Right.
because we get so caught up in technology, and I think technology is great. It can drive a lot of efficiency, but it also can tend to create a barrier between the attendee and the actual meeting experience.
Well,
And I think that's something we have to be cognizant of. So I think it's a discipline, and it's a design mindset, and how you go about delivering exceptional, memorable, unique experiences.
I love how you say the design side of it, because I think we've all been to enough meetings where, well, even clients who say, I don't want lines at my registration area, but that is the first impression often of the meeting, right? And do we take advantage of it? How can we restructure even various parts of a meeting, or right, from the registration area to the lines?
So you gave me a softball to do a little promotion on Maritz. We have a part of our organization is called the Maritz Institute, and they have been for the last 2+ years really involved in the neuroscience. And if you look at our tagline, we're the science and art of people and potential. And that's really what we're trying to get into the essence. What is at the essence of how do you motivate somebody, how you recognize, reward, and then how do you deliver that memorable experience? And I think that is going to be one of the differentiators of this industry. And we're typically very slow to evolve as an industry. And I love bringing up the example of a registration process. I mean, when's the last time you went to a registration and had anything other than the standard, A to M, alphabet, line up, you might have a barcode scanner, you might have been mailed your badge in advance, but when is the last time we really looked at that creatively? So I love the concept. We're doing some work with Jim Gilmore, who is the author of The Experience Economy. Right. And Jim is really helping us sort of evolve our business in the delivery of experiences. And he came up with a great idea, which is a regiception. I always get that word. Which, if you just think about the word, it transforms the whole experience of registration, combining registration with a reception, and make it interactive, fun. I mean, that's an example, I think, of...
the most important time to connect, right? Yeah, that's where... we talk about it even internally at our office as, the people behind the desk are often throwing a name badge at somebody or throwing a bag and letting them on their way. But the one thing about people usually who do registration is they take great pride in knowing everybody, knowing their names and having talked to them before. And what a great opportunity for you to be a connector as a registration person and connect, introduce the person. When they come up to the counter, just say, is there anybody here I can introduce you to? And if you're doing a reception at the same time, how perfect. Everybody's standing right there and having a great time.
Right. And here's the flip side of that. There is now technology that can take that concept and help the connectivity of that experience, but it still comes down to the people, right? And I talk to customers all the time. They never talk to me about a problem with a hotel room or a website. They talk about the experience they're having with our travel director, our salesperson, our project manager. It's people dealing with people, and we tend to make this much more complex than it is.
And you know what? Hoteliers love that. The front desk, the barkeeps, everyone associated with the hotel loves to be part of an experience. So again, we see it as a win-win as well from the hotel side, because again, if you can make something memorable, it's not only memorable for your attendees, it's memorable for our staff, and it jazzes them up as well. And it's a win-win again.
But an experience, and this could be a whole other topic, but so many, they think it's a tagline or a theme. And delivering an exceptional, memorable, unique experience is much more than that. It is design, it is strategy, and I think companies like ours, that's what we're specializing in.
Agreed.
It goes back to doing your homework. It's not difficult, but it's also not simple. You really have to have an objective. What are you trying to achieve? What experience? What is that memorable moment? And then execute against that.
So leveraging your numbers, I'm going to get better rates and better availability at my hotels. Using the experience, I'm going to increase my attendance and obviously the revenue and perhaps from my meeting. But now with all the things we've talked about earlier, about all the things going on in the industry, and whether Mother Nature has impacted a lot, right? How are you seeing risk management, and how are you seeing the approach to taking care of attendees changing?
Well, this is obviously another really hot topic with us, because if you look at the last 5 years, we've had dust clouds from volcanoes, we've had tsunamis, we've had earthquakes, hurricanes, medical issues, SARS, on and on and on and on. So if as an organization, as a meeting planner, you don't have a well-developed emergency preparedness plan, emergency response plan, that is really part and parcel to I think everyone's role when it comes to delivering events. But I think it's more than that. You know, we tend to think of risk management in those terms or contractual terms with hotels. You know, the old attrition, cancellation.
Right.
You know, God help us if we get caught up in that world again. But we are. It's going to be cyclical. But I think it's gone even further. I think the treatment of personal data is now a big part of this discussion. So, if meeting planners are out there, whether they have their hands on that data or access to that data, or they're working with a partner, I think PCI compliance, PCI certification is something that they really should look into, because as we know, you hear these stories every month of some sort of either a hacker issue or a integrity issue with data. And that's a big deal, and that's all part of that whole discussion about risk management.
Well, it's so easy to forget about it when you're at work and you send your email from your corporate account to your personal account just to access email, right? I mean, It's funny how that works. We have a question from the audience.
So in the world of all these risks, web and video conferencing, replacing face-to-face meetings, higher, lower?
Well, that's I think another one of our discussion items is the evolving delivery of meetings. And if you go back a year ago, it was all about virtual, and the discussion was virtual going to replace face-to-face? And I think we've probably evolved past that discussion now, and now it's more of a what's the mix of the meeting, whether it's a hybrid, whether you're doing video streaming, whether you have content on demand, how you're integrating social technology into your event. That's really what everyone, I think, is trying to wrestle with. And I'm heavily involved with PCMA, and they've done a lot of great work on that. The last year plus have been events that have really explored different mechanisms, technologies, and design methodologies for meetings. And I think that's a really great question. But my answer is no. Virtual is not going to replace face-to-face. That's been proven. We had customers specifically that went virtual, and they tried that, and they've come back, and they've re-established their face-to-face because they weren't getting the same response. They weren't getting the same emotional connection and experience like we were talking before, and that's critical.
And it also is a time element. Again, as we all know, it's those interactions late night at the bar that really get you to a level of understanding that you would not get out of just a regular meeting.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's the human side of our business, and yes, I think there's a place for technology. All of us are using it to some degree, but at the end of the day, we want the interaction, you want that experience, and it's those off-hour meetings and conversations that really lead to new ideas and new thoughts.
Those evening breakout sessions are definitely very fruitful sometimes,
Exactly.
right?
Or the bus ride.
That's very true.
Or standing in line for some event. We once did a brainstorming session at Universal Studios in Orlando, and we found out people standing in line together, waiting for a ride, came up with fantastic ideas as they were just standing around. And it was just a great way to really get people out of their comfort zone and get them into a creative environment to think creatively.
So you're making an event out of what is traditionally a non-event, and
right.
taking the template.
Can I throw in
Yeah,
one of the things?
please,
Because I think
please.
even though we're not talking technology, I think there are some impacts in our business, and I think the mobile application is obviously at the forefront right now. And it talks about what we were just talking about, the virtual content, streaming, just the basics of a meeting, your agenda, now interfacing with audience response systems, surveying technology. So I think as a meeting planner that may be watching this, I think really making sure that they're doing their investigation and design about what, and it has to start not with we just need an app. It's what is the business objective on why you want to create that environment for your attendees or for your organization. That will drive the selection of the right partner.
Well, going back to, we got off with actually another attendee question.
Yeah. So if I want to stay current, are the subject matter articles that are in industry publications a really good use of my time? What data should I be looking at, and what else would you suggest?
I think if I can take that question,
Please.
I think there's a lot of good articles out there, and yes, I think it is worth your time. Obviously, you have to ferret through a lot of information, lots of articles being written. So yes, I would continue to monitor that and read those items that you think are necessary for your particular business. In terms of data, Smith Travel Research is the leading industry provider in terms of industry data, and then obviously there's all kinds of economic data out there from the government to Moody's to Oxford Economics, multiple sources. So it really depends on what you need and what your objectives are to getting for that data.
That's a great point.
And I think the other thing is I think the challenge we all have is there's just so much.
Right.
I mean, I have a stack of periodicals from the industry that are in the last 2 months. How am I going to get through all that? So I think that one, hate to use the T word again, technologies, you can go on and set up your profiles, and if there are specific topics that are of interest, you can get those feeds right into your laptop, your iPad, whatever, and that way you can sort of filter it, but keep on top of what may be your interest. For me right now, it's learning more about the incentive market, since that's obviously part and parcel of my new responsibilities. So I'm getting additional data, feedback, and input in some of those areas, and I think it can go on to risk, it can go on to legal, it can go on to industry trends, et cetera. So
going back to risk for a minute, because certainly that's still a major deal, and we got a little off track, but I know IHG has some major initiatives on the management of risk and helping their customers. How can we better partner with our hoteliers and suppliers, and IHG in particular?
I mean, I think basically, again, it goes back to just talking with the hotel itself and understanding, what their risk plans are, the risk management plans are, just really getting underneath and say, hey, I have an issue here, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that. Just have that conversation. I think the easiest thing to do is just ask the question. Right. I mean, it goes back to that, because then you'll be comfortable, you'll hear the answer. If you're not comfortable with the answer, well, then you can ask more, right? But if you don't ask, then you're just assuming, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yes.
And I would throw out, and I'll use Mexico as an example. Mexico has had a lot of PR issues over the last couple of years, and we still do a ton of business in Mexico. It is our number one international, if you will, non-domestic U.S. Destination, and we continue to send business down there. What we have to do is, I think it's a multi-pronged approach. One is you have to make sure you get accurate and complete data, that you're sharing that with those that are making the decision, because a lot of time that information can really answer a lot of the questions or misinformation that's out there in the marketplace. So I think you have to do that. You have to have a strategy about how you're going to find that and communicate the data. And then I think if you're working with a specific organization, what are their specific security issues? Is it a transportation issue? Is it a shipping issue? Is it a VIP? Right. Every corporation has their sensitivity points. Right. Understand that, work with a hotel partner, and develop a plan for that.
And also you work with your hotel sales reps, if you have a sales rep, because again, they will know what the issues are and what questions you should be asking as well.
Yeah,
and they'll help you.
Them to get you the information,
exactly.
Right?
They will work with you to make sure that you're comfortable with the entire process and program.
And it makes all of us look better, obviously, to have better data, both for, as a planner and working for your constituency, or for the hotelier, right? Who's going to be protecting us after all. We have another question from the audience.
Introducing audience interactivity takes a lot of time, creativity, and money, specifically referencing the Learning Lounge at the 2011 PCMA in Vegas. Are there simple ways to integrate interactivity for a meeting planner that has neither time, money, nor creativity?
Well, I would say
that's a loaded question.
Yeah, if you're doing your meetings in-house, obviously
exactly.
Look outside for a potential third-party partner that may have that expertise and knowledge that can bring it to the table without great expense. But I do think if you look at the industry organizations, PCMA, MPI, they all have great resources. They have a lot of partners that are sponsoring and very involved. And I think you'd be surprised how inexpensively you can deliver some of that interactivity. There's some very competitive, price-effective solutions out there that don't require a huge amount of staff time or investment.
Yeah, Dave, what we do, I do a panel each year at our conference, and we have about 6,000 attendees. And to get questions from the audience, we can't have an open mic, because with 6,000 attendees, it couldn't happen, right? But we use instant messaging. So while we're doing our conversation on stage, we're getting questions from the audience, similar like what we're getting here, real time. And I think that's a simple, it's cheap, it's called Skype, or it's called, it's very cheap, and you can get instant messaging on multiple platforms, not only Skype, so I don't want to favor one product. But again, you can use simple technology to at least get some kind of feedback or feel for your audience even in a large setting, including 6,000 people. So it works.
So let's open this up a little bit more. What other, from a trend standpoint and from an application of trends, if I'm the person watching this and I'm a meeting planner or hotelier, what other things do you feel I should be focusing on in my job? We were just talking about there's too much information, and there is. And how do I filter it and how do I ferret it, right, to get to where I know how to use it? What other trends are you seeing out there?
Again, I think there's a lot of information, but you just got to me, the way we look at information is start out with, you want to ask what happened. So you want to start out, for me, it's always about demand. What's going on with demand? Because once I know what's happening with demand, I can kind of tell you what's going to happen with prices, because it's simple economics. So you really want to just start little by little peeling back the onion. Start off with a big question and then say, I wonder why demand is up, and just keep coming back down. So while there's a lot of information, I think there are techniques and ways to kind of package the data to make it digestible for either your clients or for yourself. But again, it does take work. I keep emphasizing it. It's not easy. And so what my team does and what I do, and no, it's not easy. It takes time, but it can be done. And it's just a matter of doing it. And it really just, what do you want to know? Asking the question first.
I would also bring it down to also the sort of a personal level, which is you're a meeting planner, you're charged with executing X number of events. I think it's important to do your own personal SWOT analysis, if you will. I just took a new job in June, president of Maritz. I have a lengthy background in the industry, but there's some new challenges with this new position. And so I went through that process, worked with an executive coach, and identified areas of development for myself based on that SWOT analysis. So I'm working on some of those areas of either perceived or real weakness so that I can improve my overall performance and value to the company. I think every individual out there, meeting planner, meeting executive, whatever level they're at, we all have that ability. And you have to just keep that appetite to learn and grow. And not assume you know everything.
That's really important because I think we do feel like we have to know everything. And this morning was kind of a realization for me driving my 4.5-year-old to school for the first day when he said, "Dad, I'm a little scared going today to school." And as we talked through it, and you explain all the things you're afraid of and the things that you've experienced, you realize that as soon as you can open up and realize, hey, you know what, I don't know all the answers, but man, do I have a lot of resources out there. And you guys have shared some great resources on that side. Do you have any other comments on that?
No, I just say you don't know, but you can always find out. So that's the easiest thing.
Raise your hand. Right, exactly. But I think that's always a danger. We're asked to be on a panel like this, and we're not certainly saying we have all the answers and we know all the trends. It's our perspective based on our organizations and our own individual history. But there is great opportunity to grow and learn, and a lot of the industry organizations have incredible resources to help you do that.
No, that's fantastic. Any other, before we kind of wrap this up, any other trends that you think, me sitting there as a meeting professional or a hotelier should really be thinking about, or maybe do some more research on? It doesn't have to necessarily be something you're an expert on. Is there anything that you would say, hey, you know what, gosh, if I had a little extra time, I might look into these particular areas?
Yeah, again, I would just look at, there's a lot of free data out on the internet. And again, Hotel News Now, it's owned by Smith Travel Research. There are lots of stuff out there, so it's free, available. Start there. So understand your marketplace, understand where you're going, and then if you need more information, you can always reach out to the companies themselves or Smith Travel Research. Great point. But I think it's available just for the asking, and some of it's free.
And get with your peers to talk about it, because just having the data doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to decipher it or translate it into something I can use. Right. But by throwing it at somebody else in the room, it may start challenging.
It's like a book club. You really have to talk about this within my group. We're always talking about the data and trying to figure out what it means.
That sounds like a fun book club.
It's a fun book club. Yeah. But that's what it takes.
Here's another idea of what I've done personally is again, we've talked about all this wealth of information. How do you get it down into some manageable arena? And I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity to create your own group. And you might have 10, 12, 15 colleagues that you appreciate their viewpoint. And so create your own LinkedIn group. Right. Start your own discussion group. And I participate in some of those. There's some great blogs out there. And I won't mention any specific, but there's some great industry blogs that bring the voice of the consumer, the voice of the planner, I think, to life. And I think that's the way we're heading, right? It's all about user-driven content and no more of the big marketing spiel and people believing what the companies are throwing at us. It really is down to that individual experience, and I think that's important.
And also, don't forget all the associations, like U.S. Travel Association has lots of data. They also have an Outlook forum that happens each fall. In October, it's coming up. I think it's in Orlando this year. I don't remember exactly, or maybe Dallas. I don't remember. But the thing is, they're bringing all these travel experts together to discuss the industry. It may be worth attending those kind of meetings as well.
And go with an intention
to learn
instead of just showing up.
Right.
And
go to
expecting
learn.
them to teach you.
Yeah. Don't just go to the golf tournament. Show up to the education session.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Well, I want to thank you guys both for coming today. You know, obviously we went through a lot today from a standpoint of, you know, looking at the cost structure and looking at those numbers that we should be looking at to help evaluate strategy and help evaluate how we look at meetings. We've also looked at measuring meetings and some of the things we might be able to do to change that attendee experience and what they're seeing in the industry. And from a risk management standpoint, you know, that kind of hidden responsibility and sometimes unsaid, though it's been in our face certainly recently, I think that unsaid responsibility we all have in this industry to be prepared and to be trying to think ahead. We're not going to know everything, but I think if we take the right steps, we're going to get there. Before we continue, I want to take another opportunity to see another Canadian experience. So let's view Canada and keep exploring.
There's something strangely encouraging about a place that's anything but Newfoundland and Labrador.
Every time I watch that video, my heart just beats. It is Newfoundland and Labrador are just it's just an incredibly special place, and I encourage all of you to visit. And I want to thank the CTC today, the Canadian Tourism Commission, for sponsoring this event, and PlanNet for hosting it. Before we close out, I wanted to ask David and Isaac if they had any closing remarks or wanted to share anything else with you. So, David, would you like to kick us off?
I think the one thing I would say is we've talked a lot about recovery and trends. The AIG effect, how things have disappeared. But I think it's really important that we also don't get complacent, that we don't assume that everything is fixed in D.C. It is certainly not. We still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of advocacy and education that we need to do as an industry about the value of this industry and the importance to our economy. We just cannot be complacent. So I think it's just an important reminder that our industry organizations led by U.S. Travel in many of these areas is doing phenomenal work. We need to continue to invest. We need to continue to be involved.
I think that's the key word. They need to be involved, and involved not only with on the policy making side, but also involved with your partners and your hotels, and really just create that conversation, create that dialogue. I think that's the best thing you can do.
That's a great point. I mean, participating in your life, I mean, you manage it. You manage your day, your personal life, your professional life. The more you engage in either side, I think you see great value in the results that come from it. I want to thank you both, really, for traveling in today and out today to this phenomenal beach out back here at Trinity Beach. You know, live webcasts bring unpredictable results. And certainly great conversation. And today we had two fantastic guests. They bring some great knowledge for all of you to share. I want to encourage you to come back if you wanted to watch it again. We do have the recorded version on the website at thebreakoutroom.yourmeeting.com. We encourage you to also come and visit us for the next Webisode, which will be occurring in October. And certainly tell your friends and coworkers. We find more and more people are watching these as groups from rooms, so we applaud you and thank you for sharing your questions today and coming. When you want answers, ask it in the breakout room. Thank you.
In a world oddly bent on conformity, there's something strangely encouraging about a place that's anything but. Newfoundland